The rain lashed against the ambulance bay doors of Mercy General, a rhythmic drumming that failed to drown out the screaming sirens. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour, when the city's worst nightmares bled into the sterile white halls of the ER. Serena Blake stood by the trauma bay, mop in hand. Her gray scrubs were oversized, hiding a physique that was far too muscular for a woman who simply changed bedpans. Her eyes, dark and observant, scanned the chaotic intake. To the doctors, she was invisible. To the head nurse, she was a punching bag. To the security guards, she was just Blake, the quiet one. "Move, Blake, you're blocking the lane," Dr. Vance shouted, shoving past her. Vance was the trauma lead, arrogant, handsome, and mediocre under pressure. The double doors burst open. Paramedics wheeled in a stretcher, their boots slipping on the wet floor. "Male, John Doe, roughly 40, 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. BP is tanking," the paramedic yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "He's combat trained. Look at the tats." The patient was a slab of muscle covered in tactical ink, but his skin was the color of ash. Blood soaked the sheets, dripping a grim trail across the linoleum. Serena didn't move. She watched the man's face. She knew that face. It belonged to a past she had buried 6 years ago in a scorched desert. "Get a line in, push epi," Vance barked, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the intubation kit. "We're losing him." The monitor wailed, a chaotic, irregular rhythm signaling the end. The patient's eyes snapped open. They were wild, searching the room with the frantic energy of a dying animal. He bypassed Vance. He bypassed the nurses. His gaze locked on to Serena, standing in the shadows with her mop bucket. "Wait," the patient rasped, coughing up a spray of crimson. He ripped his arm free from the restraint. "Hold him down," Vance screamed. "He's delirious." The man ignored the doctors. With a trembling hand, he dipped his finger into the pool of blood on his own chest. He reached for the sterile plastic drape covering the instrument tray. The room watched in horrified fascination as he moved his finger. He wrote one word in jagged red letters: Serena. Then he pointed a blood-slicked finger directly at the quiet nurse in the corner. "Commander," he whispered, the sound carrying through the sudden hush of the trauma bay. The monitor let out a long, singular tone. Flatline. The patient slumped back, dead. Silence engulfed the room. It was heavy, suffocating. Every head turned slowly from the dead man's scrawled message to the woman clutching a mop. Dr. Vance looked at the blood, then at Serena, his face twisting in confusion. "Blake?" Vance laughed nervously, breaking the tension. "Why did he write your name?" Serena's expression didn't change. Her heart rate remained at a steady 50 beats per minute. She heard a sound the others missed, the heavy, synchronized thud of boots sprinting down the hallway. "He didn't write a name," Serena said, her voice dropping an octave, cold as ice. "He wrote a target." The ER doors exploded inward. 3 hours before the doors exploded, the night had been a slow, humiliating grind. The hospital was a hierarchy, and Serena Blake was at the absolute bottom. She was currently on her knees in room 402, scrubbing vomit off the floor while the patient's family watched TV, loudly discussing how the help didn't speak English well. Serena spoke 4 languages fluently, including Farsi and Russian, but she kept her mouth shut. Silence was her armor. Silence was how she stayed hidden from the people who wanted her dead. Head nurse Holloway marched in, her heels clicking like a metronome of misery. Holloway was a petty tyrant who mistook cruelty for leadership. "Blake," Holloway snapped, snapping her gum. "Dr. Vance needs his coffee, 2 sugars, black. And after that, the morgue needs mopping. The cooler is leaking again." "Yes, ma'am," Serena said softly, keeping her eyes on the floor. "Look at me when I speak to you," Holloway hissed, stepping closer. "You walk around here like a ghost. It creeps people out. The board is looking to cut budget, Blake. One more complaint about your attitude and you're back on the street. Do you understand?" "I understand," Serena replied. She didn't feel anger. Anger was a waste of caloric energy. Instead, she automatically assessed Holloway's stance: off balance, weight on the left leg, exposed jugular. In a different life, Serena could have incapacitated her in zero point 0.8 seconds using just a reflex hammer. But in this life, she nodded and took the empty coffee mug. She walked to the break room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Dr. Vance was there, flirting with a young resident, laughing about a surgery he had botched but managed to hide. "So I told the admin," Vance bragged, leaning back, "if you want the best hands in the state, you pay the premium. Otherwise, you get stuck with the janitors trying to play nurse." He gestured dismissively at Serena as she entered. "Speak of the devil. Blake, did you sanitize the OR? It smelt like bleach." "I used the standard solution, doctor," Serena said, pouring his coffee. "Use less," Vance sneered. "My nose is sensitive. We can't all be used to the smell of trash." The resident giggled. Serena placed the coffee down. Her hand was steady, rock solid. She noticed the slight tremor in Vance's hand, a drinker's tremor. "He's not a surgeon. He's a liability." "You're dismissed, Blake." Vance waved her off. Serena walked out, fading into the corridor shadows. She checked her watch, 2:58 a.m. She felt a prickle on the back of her neck, the spidey sense, her old unit used to call it. The air pressure in the hospital felt wrong, too heavy. She went to the supply closet and moved a box of saline solution. Behind it, taped to the wall, was a small black burner phone. It was off. She hadn't touched it in 6 years. She stared at it for a long moment, wondering if the past had finally caught up with her. Then came the radio call. Code red, gunshot victim, ETA 2 minutes. Serena closed the closet, grabbed her mop, and headed for the ER, stepping back into the role of the invisible woman. But as she walked, she rolled her shoulders, loosening the muscles. The invisible woman was about to retire.
The explosion of the ER doors wasn't a bomb, it was a breach. Glass shattered inward, showering the intake desk. 4 men entered. They moved with fluid, predatory precision that screamed private military, not law enforcement. They wore tactical black armor, full face masks, and carried suppressed assault rifles raised at shoulder height. There were no badges, no police insignias, just the cold, blank stare of professionals here to sanitize a scene. "Everybody down, now," the lead mercenary bellowed. His voice was mechanically amplified by his mask. Dr. Vance, still standing over the dead John Doe, froze. His arrogance evaporated, replaced with a wet, trembling fear. "I'm a doctor. You can't came in here with—" The leader stepped forward and backhanded Vance with the butt of his rifle. The sound of plastic cracking against bone echoed through the silent room. Vance crumpled to the floor, clutching his bleeding jaw, whimpering. "I said down," the leader said calm, sweeping the room with his muzzle. "This facility is under federal containment. No one leaves, no one calls out. Anyone touches a phone, they die." The hospital staff dropped to the floor. Nurses were sobbing quietly. The resident was hyperventilating. Serena lowered herself slowly, crouching near the linen cart. She wasn't cowering, she was shrinking her target profile. The leader marched to the stretcher. He looked at the dead man, then at the blood-scrawled name on the plastic drape, Serena. He stiffened. He tapped his comms earpiece. "Target Alpha is confirmed KIA, but he left a message, we have a leak." He turned to the room, his masked face tilting like a bird of prey. "Who is Serena?" Nobody spoke. The fear was thick enough to taste. "I will ask once more," the leader said, racking the slide of his rifle. "Who is Serena? Identify yourself or I start executing the medical staff, starting with the loudmouth on the floor." He pointed his weapon at Dr. Vance's head. Vance scrambled backward, his eyes wide. "I don't know. There's no doctor named Serena, please." "Wrong answer," the leader said. His finger tightened on the trigger. Serena watched from her crouch. She analyzed the squad. 4 tangos, standard formation, 2 guarding the exit, 1 floating, 1 leader. The leader was arrogant. He had stepped too close to the gurney. The floating guard was distracted by a crying nurse. She looked at the oxygen flow regulator on the wall next to her. It was an old model, heavy brass. She looked at Dr. Vance. He was a terrible human being, a bully and a fraud, but he was a civilian under her care, and on Serena Blake's watch, no patient died unless she gave the order. The leader's weapon hummed with potential energy. "Last chance?" Serena didn't stand up. She didn't raise her hand. She simply shifted her weight onto the balls of her feet, her breathing shifting from shallow panic mimicry to the deep, rhythmic cycle of combat mode. The janitor was gone. The ghost was active. Time seemed to warp, slowing down to a jagged crawl. The mercenary leader exhaled, preparing to execute Dr. Vance. Serena moved. She didn't scream or charge. She launched herself with the explosive silence of a striking viper. She grabbed a heavy stainless steel IV pole from her left. In one fluid motion, she spun it like a javelin. The heavy base of the pole smashed into the floating guard's helmet with a sickening clang. He dropped instantly, his rifle skittering across the floor. The leader whipped around, distracted by the noise. That half second was all Serena needed. She slid across the blood-slicked floor, the same blood the John Doe had died in, and kicked the leader's kneecap. The joint shattered backward with a wet crunch. As he fell, screaming, Serena arose. She didn't reach for his gun, she reached for his throat. Her hand clamped over his trachea, crushing the cartilage to silence his call for help. With her other hand, she snatched a scalpel from the open trauma tray. Slice. She severed the strap of his tactical vest, ripped a flashbang grenade from his belt, and pulled the pin. "Close your eyes," Serena commanded. Her voice was no longer soft. It was a thunderclap of authority. She bowled the grenade toward the two guards at the door and dove on top of Dr. Vance, shielding his body with hers. Boom! The flashbang detonated with a blinding white light and a concussive roar that rattled the teeth of everyone in the room. The two door guards screamed, clutching their ears, blinded and disoriented. "Move, now!" Serena hauled Dr. Vance up by his collar. He was dead weight, staring at her in shock. "Blake?" he mumbled, his ears ringing. You just... "Walk or die, Vance," she hissed. She grabbed the crying resident by the arm and shoved them both towards the service corridor. "Go to the stairwell. Don't stop for anything." The smoke from the grenade filled the ER, creating a chaotic gray fog. Bullets began to zip through the smoke, blind fire from the disoriented guards. Thwip, thwip, thwip. Sparks flew as rounds hit the medical equipment. Serena grabbed a crash cart and shoved it violently into the path of the doorway, creating a barricade. She didn't run immediately. She paused, checking the fallen leader. He was gasping for air through his crushed throat. She leaned down, her face inches from his mask. "You're sloppy," she whispered. "Tell your control that Viper 1 is awake." She turned and sprinted into the darkness of the hospital corridors, dragging the bewildered doctor and the terrified nurse behind her. Behind them, the hospital PA system crackled to life. Lockdown initiated. Code black. The hunt had begun. The service elevator groaned as it ascended, the metal box smelling of old grease and fear. Dr. Vance was slumped in the corner, clutching his broken jaw. The young resident, whose name was Emily, was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Serena stood by the control panel, ripping the panel cover off with her bare fingers. She began hot-wiring the buttons to bypass the lobby floor. "Who are you?" Vance slurred, staring at Serena's hands. He had never really looked at her hands before. He had only seen them holding mops. Now, under the harsh elevator light, he saw them. They were covered in faint, white latticework stars, shrapnel marks. Her knuckles were calloused bone. These weren't the hands of a cleaner. They were the hands of a breaker. "We need to get to the ICU," Serena said, ignoring his question. "The oxygen supply is there. We can use the ventilation shafts to move between floors." "You killed that man," Emily whispered, eyes wide. "I neutralized a threat," Serena corrected, twisting two wires together. The elevator lurched upward. "He's not dead, just broken." You knew how to use a grenade, and that move with the pole, that was Spetsnaz or Krav Maga. I've seen it in movies." "Sit still, doctor. You're going into shock," Serena said. She knelt beside him. "Let me see that jaw." She didn't ask for permission. She tilted his head back with a grip that was firm, but surprisingly gentle. "Mandible is fractured, not shattered. You'll live." She reached into her pocket, not for a bandage, but for a roll of electrical tape she had swiped from the cart. "This is going to hurt." Before Vance could protest, she taped his jaw shut,
wrapping the black tape around his head to stabilize the bone. It was crude battlefield medicine, but it was effective. "Oomph," Vance protested. "Quiet," Serena ordered. She held up a finger. "Listen." The elevator shaft echoed with a distant metallic clanking. Rappelling lines. They were coming down from the roof. "They're sweeping top down and bottom up. They're boxing us in." She looked at the resident. "Emily, give me your badge." "Why?" "Because they're tracking the RFID chips in our ID cards. That's how they found the ER so fast." She snatched the badge, took Vance's from his coat, and ripped her own off her scrubs. She looked up at the ceiling hatch of the elevator. "We're getting out here," Serena said. "Vance, give me a boost." Vance hesitated, looking at the formidable woman who used to fetch his coffee. He saw the fire in her eyes, a cold, calculated intelligence that terrified him more than the gunman. He laced his fingers together. Serena stepped into his hands, light as a feather, and punched the emergency hatch open. She pulled herself up onto the roof of the elevator car, surrounded by the dark, greasy cables of the shaft. "Come on," she reached a hand down, "unless you want to explain to them why you're not dead." Vance looked at her hand. The scars caught the light. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that the janitor had been the only thing keeping him alive for the last 20 minutes. He reached up and took her hand. They crawled out of the elevator shaft onto the 4th floor, the administrative and ICU wing. The hallway was dim, lit only by the red glow of emergency exit signs. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant wail of sirens outside that weren't getting any closer. The police were being held back. This was a contained event. "My office," Vance mumbled through his tape. "Keycard." He pointed down the hall. If they could get into the admin offices, they could access the landlines. The cell jammers wouldn't block a hardline. They moved in a tight formation. Serena took point, moving heel to toe to dampen her footsteps. Vance and Emily stumbled behind her. They reached the admin block. Suddenly, a door swung open. It was Nurse Holloway. She looked disheveled, holding a heavy glass vase. When she saw them, her face sagged with relief, then hardened into something ugly. "Thank God," she whispered. "Vance, you're alive." "Holloway, keep your voice down," Serena hissed, scanning the corridor. Holloway looked at Serena, then at the doctor. She saw the tape on Vance's face, the dirt on their clothes. Then she looked past them to the end of the hall. 2 tactical lights swept around the corner. The mercenaries. "Over here!" she screamed at the top of her lungs, pointing at Serena. "She's here! The one you want! She's right here!" Serena froze. The betrayal was so sharp, so sudden, it cut deeper than a knife. Holloway was selling them out. "Don't shoot me!" Holloway yelled, raising her hands towards the blinding lights of the mercenaries. "Down!" Serena tackled Emily and Vance, shoving them into an open patient room just as the corridor erupted in gunfire. Bullets shredded the drywall where they had been standing. Holloway stood frozen, thinking her surrender would save her. The lead mercenary didn't even pause. He fired a single suppressed round. Holloway collapsed, a look of shock on her face as she hit the floor. Liability cleared. Target acquired in room 404. Serena kicked the door shut and dragged a heavy hospital bed in front of it. It wouldn't hold them long. She gave us up," Emily sobbed, staring at the door. "She panicked," Serena said, her face grim. She was already scanning the room. No exit. Windows were sealed safety glass. "Stupid gets you killed." She looked at Vance. He was pale, staring at the blood seeping under the door from Holloway's body. "Listen to me," Serena grabbed Vance's shoulders. "They want me, not you. I'm going to draw their fire." "What?" Vance mumbled. "There's an air duct in the bathroom. It's tight, but you two can fit. Go up to the roof. Wait for the signal." "What signal?" "You'll know it when you see it," Serena said. She grabbed a defibrillator from the wall and ripped the pads free. She turned the charge to maximum, 360 joules. "Come and get it, boys," she whispered.
The door breached with a crash. A flashbang rolled in. Serena didn't look away this time. She kicked the grenade back under the bed she had used as a barricade. The bed absorbed the blast, flipping over with a metallic screech. The smoke cleared. 3 mercenaries rushed in, weapons raised. The room was empty. "Clear left, clear right. Where is she?" One mercenary looked up. A ceiling tile was missing. "She's in the ceiling." He raised his rifle and fired a burst into the dark void above. Click. A sound came from behind them, from inside the supply closet. Not a gunshot, the sound of a canister hissing. The mercenaries spun around. The closet door creaked open. Inside, it wasn't Serena. It was 4 commercial-grade fire extinguishers duct-taped together with a slow-release valve triggered. A thick white cloud of CO2 and chemical powder blasted into the room, instantly reducing visibility to 0. Gas, gas, masks on. In the blinding white fog, a shadow moved. It wasn't in the ceiling. She had been hiding under the sink cabinet the whole time, curled into a ball like a contortionist. Serena surged out of the white mist. She didn't use a gun. She wielded a pair of trauma shears she had modified, the blades separated into 2 jagged shanks. She hamstrung the first mercenary. He went down screaming. She used his falling body as a shield against the second man, shoving him into the wall. She jammed the shears into the weak point of his armor, the armpit. The third man fired blindly. Serena rolled, grabbing the dropped rifle of the first man. She didn't shoot to kill. She fired 2 rounds into the mercenary's foot, pinning him to the floor. Silence returned, broken only by the groans of the men and the hiss of the extinguishers. Serena stood over the squad leader. He was gasping, trying to reach his sidearm. She kicked it away. She crouched down and ripped a digital tablet from his vest. She needed intel. She swiped through the encrypted files, her fingers flying over the code. It was a black file extraction. Target, Commander Serena Blake. Status, burn notice. Client, Project Ares. Ares, Serena whispered. The blood drained from her face. It wasn't a random hit. It was her old unit. The general she had served under, the one she had exposed for war crimes, was cleaning house. The John Doe in the lobby was Viper 2, her old spotter. He had come to warn her. "You're dead," the mercenary wheezed, laughing through blood-stained teeth. "Kale is downstairs. He has the building rigged. You can't save them all, Commander." "I don't need to save them all," Serena said, standing up. "I just need to kill Kale." She looked at the tablet. It showed the schematics of the hospital. Kale was in the main oxygen storage room in the basement. He was turning the hospital into a massive bomb. She checked the magazine of the captured rifle. 12 rounds. "Time to operate," she said. The basement of Mercy General was a labyrinth of pipes and humming machinery. The air here was cold, smelling of ozone and liquid oxygen. Serena moved like a wraith. She had ditched the heavy tactical vest she had taken from the mercenary. It slowed her down. She was back in her blood-stained scrubs, armed with the rifle and a backpack full of medical supplies she had raided from the ER crash carts. She reached the viewing window of the oxygen storage. Inside, the massive white tanks loomed like sleeping giants. Kale stood in the center. He was huge, a scar running down his face. He was wiring C4 explosives to the main regulator valves. If those tanks went up, the explosion would level the city block. He had hostages. Dr. Vance and Emily had been caught on the roof. They were on their knees, hands zip-tied. Kale held a detonator, a dead man's switch. If he dropped it, or if his heart stopped, the bomb went off. "I know you're there, Blake," Kale shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Come out, or the doctor gets it." Serena pressed her back against the concrete wall outside. She couldn't shoot him. The switch was active. She had to disable the hand, not the man. She looked at her inventory. A rifle, a bottle of sevoflurane, anesthesia, a flare gun from the emergency kit, and a portable oxygen tank. She put the rifle down. It was useless here. She cracked the valve on the portable O2 tank, letting it hiss. She taped the bottle of sevoflurane to it. Then she opened the ventilation hatch that fed into the storage room. "You have 5 seconds, Blake," Kale yelled, pressing the gun to Vance's head. Serena rolled the hissing tank into the vent. She waited 2 seconds, then fired the flare gun not at Kale, but into the vent shaft behind the tank. Whoosh! The flare ignited the pure oxygen leaking from the tank. It didn't explode, it created a massive, sudden overpressure, an air hammer effect. The vent cover inside the room blew off with the force of a cannonball, slamming into the back of Cale's knees. He buckled, roaring in surprise. Serena burst through the door. She didn't run at him. She slid across the floor, hurling a glass beaker she had filled with saline and betadine? No, it was pure alcohol from the lab. She threw it in his face. Cale screamed, blinded by the sting. He flailed, the dead man's switch still clutched in his hand. "Don't let go," Serena screamed at him. She tackled him, but she didn't hit him. She grabbed his hand, the one holding the switch. She used a zip tie she had pre-looped in her teeth. With a savage jerk, she cinched the zip tie around his hand, binding the detonator trigger down. Cale headbutted her. Serena flew back, tasting blood. He wiped his eyes, blinking through the alcohol sting. He leveled his bun at her. "It's over, Blake." Serena spit a tooth onto the floor. She smiled. "Look at your arm." Cale looked down. A tourniquet was wrapped tightly around his upper arm. She had applied it during the grapple. "So?" "I didn't just tie your hand," she panted. "I hit your ulnar nerve with a syringe of succinylcholine, paralytic." Cale's face went slack. His gun hand trembled, then dropped. The weapon clattered to the floor. He tried to move his legs, but he collapsed, his body failing him while his mind remained awake. The dead man's switch remained depressed, held tight by the plastic tie. Serena stood up, swaying. She walked over to the paralyzed giant. "Surgery complete," she whispered.
The silence in the oxygen room was deafening. Cale lay on the floor, eyes wide with rage, unable to move a muscle. The bomb was live, but the trigger was secured. Serena knelt and cut the zip ties on Vance and Emily. "Get out," she said. "FBI is 5 minutes out. I triggered the silent alarm in the admin office before I came down." You saved us," Vance stammered. The tape was gone from his face, ripped off in the struggle upstairs. He looked at her with awe. "Who are you?" Serena didn't answer. She walked over to the security console in the corner. She pulled the hard drive. Evidence, proof of Project Ares, proof of the general's crimes. The sound of heavy breaching charges echoed from the floor above. The real cavalry had arrived. "FBI, drop your weapons," voices boomed from the stairwell. A team of agents in windbreakers swarmed the room. They saw the paralyzed mercenary, the bomb, and the woman in the bloody scrubs standing calmly in the center. "Hands in the air," an agent screamed. Serena raised her hands slowly. A tall man in a suit pushed through the agents. He looked at the scene, then at Serena. His eyes widened. He signaled his team to lower their weapons. "Stand down," the suit ordered. "I said stand down." He walked up to Serena. He looked at the scars, the posture, the dead look in her eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Blake," the agent said, his voice respectful. "We were told you died in Damascus." "I did," Serena said flatly. "This is just the ghost." Dr. Vance and Emily gasped. "Lieutenant Colonel? The janitor?" "We have a lot to discuss, Colonel," the agent said, reaching for his radio. "Washington is going to want to know how a dead woman just dismantled a hit squad." "Washington knows," Serena said, tossing him the hard drive. "That's the proof. General Ross sent them. Now you have him." The agent looked at the drive. "If this is real, this brings down the whole Pentagon branch." "It's real," Serena said. She walked past him toward the exit. "Wait, where are you going?" the agent called out. "We need to debrief. You're a witness. You're a hero." Serena paused at the doorway. The morning sun was just starting to filter through the basement windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. "I have a shift tonight," she said dryly, "and the morgue still needs mopping." She walked out, leaving the FBI, the doctors, and the paralyzed assassin in her wake. 2 weeks later, Mercy General had returned to a semblance of normal. The bullet holes were plastered over, the glass was replaced, but the atmosphere had changed. The staff spoke in hushed tones about the night of the ghost. Dr. Vance stood at the nurses' station. He was different now, quieter.
He treated the janitors with respect. He treated the nurses with patience. He kept looking at the door, waiting. But Serena never came back. The hospital administrator, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, walked up looking annoyed. "Vance, have you seen the new night nurse? And where is Blake's file? I'm trying to process her termination for abandonment of post." "Don't bother," Vance said, staring at the empty hallway. "Excuse me? She walked off the job. She's a liability." "She's the reason you still have a hospital," Vance snapped. A courier walked in carrying a small brown paper package. "Package for Dr. Vance. No return address." Vance took the box. His hands trembled slightly. He opened it. Inside was a single, pristine coffee mug and a note. Vance unfolded the paper. It wasn't written in jagged blood this time. It was elegant, precise cursive. "Doctor, remember, the hands that clean the floor are the same hands that can hold a weapon. Treat your team well. I'll be watching. S." Underneath the note was a small metallic object, a pin, the insignia of the Special Forces Medical Corps. Vance smiled, a genuine, humble smile. He put the pin on his white coat, right next to his ID. "Is she coming back?" Emily asked, appearing beside him. "No," Vance said, looking out the window at the city skyline. "Ghosts don't stay in one place." Somewhere in the city, in a different hospital, under a different name, a woman in gray scrubs picked up a mop. She looked at the chaotic ER, her dark eyes missing nothing, ready for whatever the night would bring. Never underestimate the quiet nurse.